Hi everybody, this is Ryan Meister and I am here to go into and examine Alfred Binet and his educational theories. So a lot of you guys might be wondering, who is Alfred Binet? Alfred Binet was born in Nice, France on July 8, 1857. Binet was known for his prominent role in the development of experimental psychology in France and his fundamental contributions and measurements to intelligence. Alfred Binet's contribution to neuropsychology, particularly in his pioneering work with intelligence scales and tests, solidified his permanence in developmental psychology. Alfred Binet had a very, very long and great career in psychology. He abandoned an emerging law career in 1878 to devote himself to medical and scientific studies. He became associated with a research laboratory at the Sorbonne in 1891 and acted as its director from 1895 to 1911. Binet's early experimental methods measured higher mental processes and reasoning ability, devising techniques using paper, pencil, pictures, and portable objects. In 1895, he founded L'An Psychologique, the premier French psychological journal. Concurrently, Binet opened a Paris laboratory for child study and experimental teaching. Binet carried out essential studies in experimental psychology applied to education. He was recognized as a pioneer in several areas of experimental psychology, including child psychology and the study of genetic and environmental factors and the role played by education in children's cognitive development. With the reform of the French educational system in 1904, Binet was appointed as the coordinator of a commission to examine disabled individuals. He studied a variety of subjects with a range of abilities, including the likes of ordinary people, handicapped children, and individuals with special abilities for a diversely derived median of intelligence. In 1905, Alfred Binet and cohort Theodore Simon created the Binet-Simon scale. This test was originally formulated for the identification of children requiring special education. This test was later used as a consistent measurement of childhood intelligence and was the groundworks for the Stanford Binet Intelligence Test. I'm very sorry if you could hear that rude plane in the background. I live right by the airport, so I'm sorry if you can hear that. Binet's experiments, theories, and findings. Many of the first tests Binet tried were based on the ones used by two earlier pioneers in intelligence research, Francis Galton and James McKeen Cattell. Both men had tried to measure mental ability using psychological tests. Some of these tests measured reaction time and were thought to measure how effectively the nervous system worked. The hypothesis of Binet's predecessors was that intelligence requires information, and this information comes from sensations. When Binet tried reaction time tests with his daughters and their young friends, he discovered that his young subjects' average reaction times were longer than those of adults. Despite a lengthy average response time, the children's individual reaction times varied widely. As a result of the experiment, Binet concluded that the real difference between children and adults was not the speed of which they could react, but their attention span, which is very relevant to the field we're all going into. The findings led Binet to doubt that simple physiological tests could ever be used for establishing the difference between children and adult minds. Instead, it seemed that more complex tests, such as those requiring sustained attention, would be necessary to determine intelligence. Binet did not believe in distinct developmental stages. However, some of his descriptions of mental variations between children and adults are close to Piaget's descriptions of various developmental stages. He had several notable contributions as well. The publication of Binet's book, Animal Magnetism, in 1887 is considered by the journal Science 84 as one of 20 of the century's most significant developments or discoveries. Binet co-authored Animal Magnetism with Charles Ferrer. In 1895, Binet published a book entitled Fear in Children, discussing child phobias and anxieties. The book on double consciousness, Experimental Psychological Studies, is a collection of essays devoted to the investigation of unconscious phenomena in their relation to double consciousness. Binet briefly presents the experiments made by M. Pierre Janet and himself upon the significance of unconscious phenomena. Binet was one of the founding editors of Liens Psychologiques, a yearly publication comprised of original articles and reviews of the progress of psychology. This publication is still in print in 2020. The most notable contribution that Alfred Binet offered was the Binet-Simon scale. This scale was revised at Stanford University in the United States in 1916 and shortly came to be known as the Stanford Binet test. This test is the mother of all standardized IQ testing. This test result was originally returned as a mental age, but is now presented as the numerical intelligence quotient, or IQ. The test has undergone multiple revisions and is currently in its 5th edition. The Stanford Binet test is an intelligence examination determined through 5 cognitive evaluations. These 5 factors are knowledge, fluid reasoning, quantitative reasoning, working memory, and visual spatial processing. Each of these 5 factors is weighted and the combined score is reduced to a ratio known as the intelligence quotient, or IQ. Additionally, both nonverbal and verbal responses are measured in IQ determination. The Stanford Binet test is an individually administered measure of cognitive abilities, and the test is given to subjects from 2 years old and up. The Stanford Binet test creates a quantitative assessment of an individual's abilities based on a combination of the aforementioned 5 areas. The test can be potentially and theoretically administered to subjects from a toddler age to late adulthood if cognitive alertness is present. There are a few different measures and tables that I found to describe the intelligence that or the intelligence ranges that the Stanford Binet test had. Now, earlier works and of these tables are oftentimes what we would now be reconsidering as politically incorrect based off of their verbiage. They were using terms like idiot and moron and imbecile to describe various ranges of disability. Now we have the IQs in the range of 40 to 54 as moderately impaired or delayed, 55 to 69 is mildly impaired or delayed, 70 to 79 is borderline impaired or delayed, 80 to 89 is low average, 90 to 109 is average, 110 to 119 is high average, 120 to 129 is superior, 130 to 144 is gifted or very advanced, and 145 to 160 is very gifted or highly advanced. Previous revisions had the upper levels of intelligence be genius or super genius. Now we have much more correct and non-offensive terms, which I think is a good thing. There are advantages and disadvantages of Alfred Binet's intelligence test and its psychological contributions. The internal consistency of the Stanford Binet test is thought to be well structured compared to other IQ tests. The IQ scores are often considered accurate, and the Stanford Binet test has consistently been proven to be precise in identifying gifted individuals. The Stanford Binet assessment has been criticized for its cultural biases against subjects from a lower socioeconomic class, its diminished reliability with individuals whose IQ scores are less than 50, its inability to accurately predict intelligence from preschool-age children, and for yielding lower scores towards very young children from a lower socioeconomic class that lack sufficient developmental resources. Therefore, the test is implicitly biased towards higher SES subjects. Additionally, the assessment has also been thought to be insensitive to age and its cognitive differences. The lack of accountability towards cognitive discrepancies, either resulting from age or being from a lower socioeconomic class, makes this test unreliable towards certain demographics. The evolving definition of intelligence stemming from and contradicting Binet's numerical measurements has been another way people have been starting to measure intelligence. Binet's irrefutably important contributions toward developmental psychology and intelligence measurements have proven to be great framework for other theories of intelligence, including Howard Gardner's theory of multiple intelligences. As opposed to Binet's long-revered intelligence quotient that affixes a permanent number to an individual's intelligence, Gardner argues that intelligence is multidimensional and that our individual brains work in ways that each of us put own personal intelligence into. And I got that straight out of the Powell book on page 56. Ideas of intelligence development in individuals with the integration of education and other mental stimuli are becoming more apparent. Researchers have begun to believe that the capacity for knowledge and learning can change in its manifested differentiality amongst subjects. Figure 2.7 from Powell on page 56 illustrates that notion. And there are some statistics regarding Alfred Binet's theories and experiments. Verbal test items in traditional measurements of intelligence, like the Stanford Binet test, are believed to be susceptible to and contingent upon social exposures, while nonverbal items are free from such influence. In the article, A Comparison of the WPPSI and Stanford Binet Intelligence Scale Among Lower SES Black Children by Trevor E. Sewell, Sewell compared the performance of 35 lower SES African American kindergarten children on the Wechsler Preschool and Primary Scale of Intelligence and the 1972 Norm edition of the Stanford Binet test. While there were no sex differences, significant age-related differences were found between the two evaluations, with the WPPSI having a higher average IQ amongst its subjects. This demonstrated the implicit linguistic bias the Stanford Binet test has in favor of higher SES subjects. Sewell concluded that the WPPSI is a more appropriate measure of cognitive ability amongst lower SES children. Each of the aforementioned studies illustrates that, despite its accuracy in finding gifted participants, the Stanford Binet test has inherent sociocultural and socioeconomic biases. Other intelligence and educational theorists like Gardner have accounted for such disparities to aid disadvantaged individuals in measurements of intelligence. While the Stanford Binet test laid the foundation for modern intelligence testing, expansions from other intelligence, educational, and psychological theorists have advocated for more inclusive measurements of intelligence, like Gardner. Conclusion, Alfred Binet was very, very important in intelligence measurements and educational theories. He is best remembered for his role in establishing the first numerical scale of intelligence, but his contributions to experimental science, individual psychology, and applied pedagogy transcend that of intelligence testing. Binet was a liberal, pioneering scholar whose eclectic and diverse research interests revolutionized the scientific study of the child for years to come. And that concludes my little presentation. I really appreciate you listening to this. I hope you guys have a wonderful holiday, and I'll talk to you guys later.